Okay. So a few slides just to provide some background, some overview, and it'll help in how we're thinking as we go into the step-by-step. But I think that's probably where the most useful portion will be. So this is the merchandising piece of it. So merchandising means lots of things. This isn't covering all of merchandising. The part that I want to talk about here is around category and product management, product attributes, assortments, and catalogs. And we'll go deeper into the attributes part because everyone seems to have problems with that. And we know that there's some room for improvement there, but at least being able to work with what we currently have, hopefully I can clarify, at least show you, how to get it working, and then get some feedback and questions on anything that goes beyond that. I think you've probably seen this diagram before, or at least something like it. But again, just for background and for overview, this is a kind of the data model, keeping the kind of the product at the center, and that products are categorized. So that's a super important part in any of our merchandising story, and that from defaulting values to new products, for updating products in a bulk way, for adding attributes to products, for building assortments, for doing discounts, category is a key thing there. We have lots of abilities for being able to act on the individual product or even a variant of a product, but for the most part, it's going to be category that is key. When we talk about categories, there's a generic category framework, and then each category hierarchy that gets created can have one or more roles associated to it, and then based on that role, it has some different capabilities. There's many, but three that are important in this topic are the navigation category hierarchy, supplemental category hierarchies, and the main retail product hierarchy, the retail merchandising hierarchy, I think is the name of it. Whenever we talk about attributes, it all comes from the category. There's no other way to get a category on a product other than through its category. You can't add an attribute directly to a product. The product has to be in a category. The category has attribute groups associated to it. Within the attribute groups are one or more attributes. So it can be very basic and be one-to-one, or an attribute group can be a collection of attributes. And through the relationship between the category, those attributes are applied to that product. Attributes themselves have values. So if you think of it as a kind of a named value pair, you're defining the data type that it is, you're giving it a name, and then for each product, there is a value for that, so that you can actually better describe that product. Products themselves, this is slightly less important to our topic here, but obviously products can have related products that hang off of them. If it's a product master, it can have variants of size, color, style, and configuration. And then there's barcodes that can be created where each product can have multiple barcodes for things like unit of measure, for the variant combinations. Products are then assorted. So this could be actually, and maybe there should be a line coming from the retail category as well. So products can be assorted to one or more channels. A product can be in multiple assortments. And then there's this little dotted line that goes along the bottom, which basically shows that a channel has a navigation hierarchy associated to it. This was not important, not utilized at all in EPOS. It's extremely important for MPOS. So you have to have your navigation hierarchy to get any of the kind of clienteling and merchandising scenario. Browsing for products, looking at product details and specifications and attributes, product comparison. All of that requires that navigation hierarchy. So that becomes a very important portion of the MPOS configuration and implementation. And then, on top of that is the catalog itself. And we'll talk a little bit about when catalogs are important, or the difference between catalogs and assortments, which when we first implemented these things was one of the most common questions. Maybe by now people have a better idea of it, but we can touch that again too. I'll wait till the cameras are down. Okay. And then I thought I was done. Sorry. There's product images as well, which I don't plan on covering today. I know that that's also a major pain point. We can touch that another time. I know that there's been another session for that, I think last year. You might be able to look that up and find that session. There's also a pretty decent document that's a work in progress that really outlines that all conceptually as well as step by step. I don't believe that document's published yet, but we can kind of light a fire under that and get that published quicker as well. And images utilizing the attribute framework as well. I don't know. Where will it be published? The wiki. Yes, the wiki is the place to go. Yep. So if we start off with category management, question.
Sorry, one short question. The retail category structure is linked to attribute groups, while in all the category structures we just link attributes. This thing is causing the data migration framework, data management framework not to work if you use it in this way. So then you have to link it in all the way. What's the reason that it was chosen to do differently for retail than for all the other setups like procurement catalog?
So the question or the comment was that the retail categories make that link between the attributes and the categories by groups, but the other types, so like procurement categories, don't. They just go directly to the attributes. Trying to remember back. So the concept of the attribute group came from feedback around making it easier to manage them, and that typically these sets of attributes would often be assigned together, and rather having to do that over and over and over at various category levels, having a group would make sense there. Why it's different for retail versus the other category hierarchies, I'm not 100% sure. It's potentially just an uptake thing. So the question is there a way around it? First of all, it's the first I've heard of the issue, so I didn't know there was a problem there. I'm sure others have, but yeah, okay. Excellent, yeah.
Because if you change it, the impulse is still working, so you can set the attributes to the procurement
Sure.
category, and retail is still working.
Okay. Excellent.
If you try to import again, you have to put the best data and the
So the comment over here is that there's a KB that's been written about importing categories and attributes. And okay, thanks. Okay, categories and category management themselves. So the basic idea behind it is to be able to group like products together. So if a bunch of these products have similar capabilities, similar attributes and properties, then you can tend to work with them in a group rather than one-off. And that makes a lot of sense for things like defaulting values to new products that are created, assigning attributes. So it's things like if you take a digital camera, for example, all digital cameras are going to have a certain number of specifications or attributes or qualities that are the same, versus if you're selling produce or something. Like a banana and a digital camera have completely different capabilities and attributes. So that's by grouping like things together, you can work with them at a group level. And then you can also use that for, say, for product assortments based on categories of products, discounting categories of products, and then navigation. So that navigation hierarchy comes back in, and that when you're doing a product lookup through browsing, you can navigate through products through categories of products, whether it's in a tree view or more of like the drill down view, where we have both of those. Category hierarchies are generic. There's a generic framework there where you define the tree view. You define the nodes, which can be n levels deep, and then you give it a purpose. And that same structure can be used for more than one purpose. So in our demo data, you'll see that we have the main retail merchandising hierarchy, which has products in it from AdventureWorks, which is sporting goods, Fabricam, which is apparel, and Contoso, which is electronics. So they're all there. But in our demo data, we have 3 different channels with 3 different stores, and we have navigation hierarchies that are a subset of those things. So that's one way that you can have different types of businesses and different experiences in different channels. But it doesn't have to be that way, where you have to manage all these different category hierarchies and keeping them separate and all that. In a very simple scenario, your merchandising hierarchy and your navigation hierarchy could be the exact same thing. So you can create one hierarchy and give it more than one purpose. So the demo data kind of complicates things a little bit, but it also shows what some of the capabilities are there. I mentioned before that the categories, once you give them a purpose, take on different capabilities and characteristics. So a category hierarchy that's being used for procurement is very different than, say, the main retail merchandising category hierarchy. So the main retail merchandising category hierarchy, you can set defaults for products so that when you create a new product that's in that category, it can pick up things like taxes and units of measure and dimension groups and things like that. Whereas if it's a supplemental category hierarchy, it doesn't pull in any of the product defaults, and it's used mainly for grouping things together. So again, based on the type of category hierarchy it is, when you're viewing the category hierarchy under that context, it's going to be different, but the main structure under it could be the same. I could create that tree view once and say this is used for procurement, it's used for my merchandising, and it's used for as a supplemental hierarchy. If I open that same hierarchy from different places, it'll take on those different characteristics. And many of you have probably used and seen that before, but again, just to kind of level set to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. The attribute framework, from a retail standpoint, is built of basically three main things. So first, you define the attribute type, which is it's basically defining the data type and its basic properties for that attribute. And then that attribute type is part of an attribute itself. And this architecture or this design is a little bit more complicated than maybe it needs to be for general purpose, but it allows a lot of flexibility and reuse. So that type can be used in multiple attributes. That attribute can be in multiple attribute groups. So there's some good flexibility there, even though it requires a little extra setup and a little more configuration. And then again, I think we already covered the attribute group is just a collection of attributes. Assortments and catalogs. So we define the assortment as the ability to define which products are available where and when. And we talked about it in the meeting or in the session earlier today, that the overall product mix of a store is a sum of its assortments. So I could create multiple date-bound assortments that overlap. So my spring and summer products are going to have different beginning and end dates, but some of the spring products could still be available into summer, so those would overlap, and during that period, both spring and summer products would be available. I could do it based on categories. This is my shoes assortment, and that shoes assortment is only going to be available in these stores and not those stores for various reasons. Or it could be by channel, or group of channel. So these are the stores in the eastern region, these are the stores in the western region, and they're going to manage those assortments that way, or anywhere in between. So it's the complete intersection and union of all of those assortments together. Assortments are typically additive. So if you have a product that's in one assortment and a channel has 10 different assortments on it, that product will be part of that channel's overall assortment. So they're all added together, with the exception of excludes. So within an assortment, you can actually choose to exclude products. In that situation, exclude always wins. So if at any point you've excluded a product from an assortment, that product is not available in that channel. Yes? Yeah. So the question there is there any plans to extend assortment to the distribution side of things? There was, and we actually started to invest in that a little bit. And the very limited kind of replenishment capabilities that are part of retail, like the buyer's push and cross-dock stuff, we can restrict that based on assortment. The reality is it didn't go any further than that. And again, it all comes based on feedback. So if we're not hearing that it's needed, then we're not going to prioritize it. So it could be things that we're aware of. It could be things that we wanted to do. But if we kind of put out that first iteration of it and then never hear anything, then it's hard for us to know that is needed. So yeah, so always make sure that we're getting that feedback. The catalog is utilized to provide, let's see, probably the best way to say it is either date time specific and or channel specific enrichment of the same products that are assorted to that channel. So I guess, one example would be, I don't know, I sell the same pair of pants in the summer as I do in the winter, but in the winter catalog, it's a snowy scene, and in a summer catalog, it's a nice day outside or something like that, basically, right? So it's the same product. It's available in the same channel, but for various reasons that enrichment is going to change. The description, any of the attributes, the images that are there are going to change for the fact that this product is available in that particular catalog. The other thing would be its navigation hierarchy can be different. So you can browse catalogs differently than you'd be browsing your main assortment. So your main assortment has a navigation hierarchy that's assigned to the channel, and catalogs can have hierarchies assigned to the catalog, would be the other way. So again, grouping and segregating products apart for maybe promotional reasons or purely for navigation reasons, providing date and channel-specific enrichment. We also have the ability to do pricing based on catalogs. So if I buy this product out of this catalog, it would get this price group, which would dictate its trade agreement or any other promotions or discounts. If I buy the product out of this catalog, I could get a different price. So when Scott does his pricing session, if this isn't clear, you can ask more questions there. But basically, you can assign price groups to channels, to affiliations, and to catalogs, among other things. But those are the ones that typically come into play most in a store when you're trying to determine what that price is going to be. Yes? Oh, is it? Oh, sorry. Okay. Yes?
So do you always need a catalog for the store?
No. So the question is, do you always need a catalog for the store? No. And that was a very common misconception early on, and that is definitely not the case. There's no requirement for a catalog in the store.
So what do you lose if you don't have a catalog?
It depends. Potentially nothing. So a store can have one or more of its, or zero or more of its own catalogs, in which case maybe it's a promotional catalog, like this is what's on sale this weekend, or it's my spring or summer catalog, something like that, where really you're just kind of grouping different products together, potentially with different prices. So there's the browsing and kind of clienteling experience of looking through a catalog that could be just for that channel. And then there's the browsing other channels' catalogs as well, would be the only thing that you would miss there. But even then, you could still browse another channel's assortment. Like you don't have to browse a particular catalog. So it's not required whatsoever for POS, for brick and mortar. Yes?
There are certain challenges by managing the catalog. One of them that we run the catalog, you can find out what the catalog is. The only way to remove from all the categories and then so is there any workaround to improving the usability of catalog?
Yep. So the question here was that there's some usability issues in managing catalogs. I couldn't agree more. I actually wasn't aware of that particular one, but I'm just in using catalogs as much as or as little as I do, I can definitely see where there's room for improvement there. I have to say it's also another area where we feel like there's room for improvement there, but if we're not getting that feedback, we're not going to prioritize it over other things. So, I'll say it again, is give us that feedback, and that'll help us make sure that we're investing in the right place. If we put it out there and we don't hear anybody complain, then we think that either no one's using it or it's fine as it is. We've got to always have to have that feedback coming in. And, this is one of those great opportunities to do that. So in a sense, you are giving that feedback, but, we can't just wait for these yearly events or whatever. Get that feedback into us as often as you can. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to show, if my sessions haven't all timed out, I want to show actually some of that category management, and then my goal is to create a new attribute type, a new attribute, and a new attribute group, attach it to a product, and then see it and use it in MPOS as a refiner, because that's the other part that always comes up is how do I get these refiners to work? And again, our demo data there is a little bit lacking too. So we have we have some decent attributes in the demo data that would be good for explaining concepts and showing to customers, but it's not necessarily set up to demo the refining capabilities as well as it should be. So I'm going to start off in the category and product management workspace. And this will show you that there are the various types of category hierarchies. To save time, I'm not going to create everything from scratch, but basically, these are all those generic hierarchies that I talked about before. A hierarchy here is not used at all on its own. It's only used in the context of its purpose. So I'll just show a little bit about creating a category hierarchy here. Whoops. As a generic category hierarchy, it is nothing but a tree view. It doesn't have any actual capabilities on its own. So you can create your top node. In this case, it would be maybe all products. It has some basic properties on its own. And you can actually put attributes on the category itself. But those attributes are to describe the category, not the products within them. Yes? Yes. Yeah, so the question was, do we have any plans to make the key in the table for categories to change the key so that it's not, the name doesn't have to be unique, correct? Yes. Yes, we do. Yeah. Yes, we've heard that one a number of times. I don't know exactly when that would come in, but we've heard it enough and we've discussed it enough. But basically, so you can see that it's n levels deep. This will keep nesting those down. If you want to put another category back at the other level, then you simply select that category before you create your new one. And you can see how you can build a tree view with your navigation or with your category hierarchy there. My recommendation when you're using that for a navigation hierarchy is to not go too deep. And that's why we have different purposes for these things. So when I'm doing my merchandising or when I'm doing my assortment planning or if I'm doing discounting and promotions, I might need to be really specific with my categories. It's a good way to be able to group products together, even for kind of intermediate reasons. When you're doing your navigation hierarchy, think about how many clicks it's going to be for that user to get down into that. And kind of the recommendation there that we've seen works best is maybe 3 or 4 levels deep. But again, it's configurable. It's up to your needs, but that's why we can have a different hierarchy specifically for navigation. Just checking out my notes here. Okay, so if I want to go back and add a new, actually the roles, pardon me. Okay, so here's where you actually assign the roles to those things. So I have my main merchandising category hierarchy, which is called the retail product hierarchy. In this case, there can only be one. If we have a supplemental hierarchy, navigation hierarchy, you can have multiple of those because navigation hierarchies can be used in one or more channels. Each channel could have their own if you need to. Supplemental hierarchy is meant just for that. So you can have hierarchies that you're creating, even if it's just to create a single discount. You could create a really temporary supplemental hierarchy in that case, or like a really purpose-built hierarchy. But the retail product hierarchy is limited to having only one. But if I had created a new hierarchy, I would basically come in and then give it a role. So I would choose which type it is. I'll say it's a supplemental hierarchy in this case. And then I would go and choose that hierarchy that I had just created. And now I could then view that hierarchy in the context of, in this case, a supplemental retail hierarchy. If we go back here, I can then go and view those supplemental hierarchies. There's the one I just gave that role. So this was previously used for commodity codes, and I've just now made it a supplemental hierarchy. There's a couple examples in the demo data for that, but you can imagine it just being a way of being able to group products together. One thing different about supplemental hierarchies than the others is that they can actually contain other categories. So you can actually take a category of products from a different hierarchy and include that into the supplemental hierarchy. The main product hierarchy will allow you to do your merchandising. So if I view the retail product hierarchy here, you'll see that I can assign default values to the products that are within them. So here I can set things like dimension groups, variant groups, some of the retail-specific properties that are here. Some of the labels on this I don't think are the best that they can be, but the idea here is that we can even do cross-LE. So you can take a global product and you can specify its values per legal entity, and then when you release that product, it'll automatically pull in those values. Yes? The question is, are there plans to add more released products fields to the details here? There should be, to be honest. I think if a new released product field is added and it makes sense to modify that in a mass or bulk way, then it should be here. And if it's not, then it's a miss. Yes. Feedback. Yes. Max. Yeah. So the suggestion there is perhaps a framework where you can actually choose which fields you're going to include there. There's certainly a challenge there when it comes to the underlying schema, but that would make sense. Yes. Okay. So the feedback there is that, so I think I'd probably need more details on that feedback, but it sounds like it's difficult to manage to view what's shared across the categories. Correct. Yeah. I understand what you mean by that. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yeah, so the comment there is to add this stuff to the supplemental hierarchies. The problem there is that with that whole defaulting thing, when you create the product, if it's in multiple places, which one do we take? But then for updating, you could use it from any of them or something like that. Yeah, potentially. Yeah. Yes? So the question there is the ability to be able to import the defaults instead of having to import and specify them manually. I'm not aware of any investments there either. No. This is great, and even if you don't learn anything new from this session, honestly, we've put these features out quite a while ago now, and we hardly get any feedback on them at all. So it makes us think that people aren't using them. So this is good that it's not good that you're struggling, but it's good that you're having problems that you can then give us the feedback so that we can improve on it. Yes. So there's lots of feedback avenues. This is one of them. Any other kind of one-off meetings we have, any kind of feedback is better than no feedback. So if it's a bug, then through CSS and opening a service request, that's one way to get us feedback. If it's typically Connect is used for kind of pre-release feedback, right? And I think that's a perfectly fine tool for that. So I think if it is pre-release feedback on a pre-release program, then Connect is a great way to do that. We also have the user voice program, which to me, at this point anyway, is the best for this type of feedback, is putting in through user voice. Show of hands for everyone that knows what user voice is. Okay, good. Okay, if you don't, then see me afterwards and I'll talk to you about user voice. And then just a really quick note on user voice is that user voice itself may be going away as there's potential plans for a more Dynamics-wide feedback portal. But the idea behind it, the content in it, and all that won't go away. So if user voice itself gets replaced with something else, then I think that's fine, but the concept behind it would be the same. Yes?
One short piece of feedback would be get it out of retail and put it in standard product. This is the reason that with most customers we are enabling the retail configuration key because of this functionality. So it's not only retail, we use it everywhere, every time.
Excellent. Thank you. No, that's good feedback too. Yeah. Great. Okay. I know lunch is probably at 12, I imagine. Is that 12:15? Oh, okay, good. Okay. Okay. So now I want to do the attribute stuff. So now we know that we can create different types of hierarchies. Different types have different purposes and different capabilities. We can add products to those category hierarchies. You can add them in a number of different ways. You can add them from the hierarchy itself. You can add them from the product itself. So you can kind of go in either direction to add them there. And actually, just to save time, I'm going to navigate this way. Then going through the menus. So first thing I want to do is I want to create a new attribute. Let's say this is going to be material. Right? And the data type that I want to use for it. So you've got kind of basically all of your typical data types. For this, it's going to be like on the handbags that we have in our demo data. So I'm going to say whether it's leather or vinyl or fabric. I don't know. I don't buy a lot of handbags. So I can create this attribute type. I can give it a fixed list. This is where I can say that it's leather. Now we did consider localization here, where any of these strings can be localized using that framework. Let's see. Let me say vinyl. Do they make vinyl handbags? Okay, canvas. There we go. Okay, so now I've got a few different values to choose from. So this could be just free-form text. It could be a fixed list. It could be date, time, integer. All the different Boolean, different data types. In this particular example, these tend to be the more common ones that we've seen or that we have people ask questions about. So I'll create this attribute type called material. Now remember, that's the type. Think of this as the data type with some extra properties on it. It might seem a little bit redundant, but it does provide a little flexibility as I take this attribute type and I go and stick it on an attribute. Especially probably in my example, I'll probably also call it material. But it wouldn't necessarily have to be that way. You could create a very generic type and then use it on very specific attributes. There we go. Okay, so now this attribute type, in the context of this attribute, can take on some additional properties and capabilities. And I will say that this also leads to many, many issues, is that not all of these are utilized by point of sale. So a lot of these were implemented for the e-commerce channel. And we don't do a great job at differentiating what applies where within the user interface. And I know that sometimes our documentation is a little bit lacking as well. So improvements are coming in this area as far as like how and which ones and the experience for searching based on attributes. To me, the important one here for point of sale is whether it can be refined, right? So I can set that this one here can be refined. That is key into point of sale picking it up as a refiner, but that's not it. So just selecting that alone won't do it either. You actually need to set these filter settings as well. And what I found, and this could possibly just be a bug, is even if you just leave the defaults here, you still have to open this and save it. All right, so yes, so it's basically opening this form is going to populate that data, and if you don't, then it's not there. What this does do, though, is it's going to determine how the refiner UI experience is in point of sale. So is it single value selection or multi-value selection? So if I want to find multi-value would be I want to find products that are either canvas or leather, versus if it's single value, I can only choose one of those. In this case, it's going to be a list because it's a string. But if it's currency or any kind of a value, I could make that as a slider. I could make it a range where you could it's a start and an end, and you could put in the value that way. So this is basically just going to determine the user experience around this attribute. And then you can change the sort and the sort direction. So in this case, I'm going to sort by name. I want it to be a list, and I want it to be single value. But you do have to check. You have to go in and set those filter settings there. The date type enabled as well. It probably is. So I don't know for a fact. It probably is, but there's not a control for it. There wouldn't be a good date picker if that's what you're looking for. Yeah, there's not. I'm 99% sure there's not a good date picker for that. So it would probably just be a string field, and you'd have to format the date. Yeah. Yep. I will say that these set of options, again, the can be refined is the important one for our purposes, but these can also be overridden in the context of the channel too. So these will set the defaults, and so you have to also be aware that you're setting it properly for the channel. It's another gotcha kind of spot, right? So you can think I set it here, but it's not working. You actually need to go and check it as you apply it to the channel, which I'll get to in 1 second. So now I've created my attribute type for material. I've put that attribute type into an attribute called material. Sorry, I'm not that creative, I guess. And now I will create an attribute group. I could actually add this to an existing attribute group because I think we have one for handbags. But just to show this, I'll create another one, and I will call it material. And now you specify which attributes are part of this attribute group. It can be one or more. There it is. Okay, and all this really is a grouping of attributes. And you can specify what that default value is on this. So each of them will have a default, and in this case, if you don't go and set it specifically, it'll default to a particular attribute. So now I've created my type. I've assigned it to an attribute. I've put the attribute into a group. So now, how can I make this thing actually appear on a product, and more importantly, appear on a product in point of sale? So there's a couple more things that we need to do. We need to go back to our hierarchies. Now, you can put these attributes on products using any of those hierarchies. So it can be supplemental hierarchy, navigation hierarchy, retail product hierarchy. That's great, and you can see those properties in back office from any of those categories, any of those attributes. If you want those attributes to show up in point of sale, then it has to be either the retail navigation hierarchy or the retail product hierarchy. So I can use a supplemental hierarchy to put attributes onto a product, but they won't show up in point of sale. Okay? So that's kind of another gotcha, is that through the framework and through the UI, it appears that the attributes are on the product, but that won't show up in point of sale. It has to be of those two types. So I'm just going to go to my navigation hierarchy. And for Fabricam, it's the fashion hierarchy. And I want to add this to the handbags. So here's my handbags. And I go to the attribute groups. You can see there's already a couple. So these attributes here are common across all fashion products. These attributes here are specific to handbags. So you get a good idea about how this would work. And now I've added another one that's specifically for material. Now I could take that same material attribute and go and put it on scarves or on sunglasses, because those could be made from the similar materials as well. So you can see the kind of the flexibility that's there. But I'm going to go ahead and add in that attribute group into this category hierarchy. So now that I've done that, if I go to my products, and I find my handbags, and just pick any of these, I should be able to see that that attribute is part of that product. What did I call it? Oh, material. Right there. Okay. So I've added this attribute to the category of products, and so now all of the products in that category have this attribute, and it's defaulted the value to leather. But for any of these products, I could change this value. In fact, let me make sure I do that. Okay, knowingly. So the brown leather. Oh, hey, I should probably make it leather. That would make sense, wouldn't it? All right. That one is okay. That one's already leather. So let me change a different one. I didn't put snakeskin as one of my options. What was that? Oh, there is a vinyl one. It's spelled wrong too, right? Isn't that spelled wrong? Oh, is that okay? Okay. All right. So the vinyl one is vinyl. The leather one is leather. So I've set two different values of the same attribute on similar products. Yes. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the. So the question there is, can we put the selection of the attribute on the variant rather than on the product master? We have heard that before. I'm not aware of any plans to do it, though. But yes, I have heard that feedback before. Why would you want to? I can imagine that. So if you think of variants as size, color, and style, as they are, then you could, maybe it's less. But you could use those variants to come up with different. You could use those dimensions to come up with different variants that are beyond that, and therefore you could see where the attributes could be different across them. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not. That's what I'm saying. We've heard the request. I'm not aware of any plans to be able to do it. But the comment there was that you're right. The matrix of data will explode very quickly. Yes.
The area I see it being used is that the price varies on the attribute. And are you going to talk about attribute-based pricing?
So the question there is where he's seeing that is when the price varies based on the attribute, and if I'm going to talk about attribute-based pricing. So there's no plans to talk about attribute-based pricing because we have no plans to do attribute-based pricing at the moment. So there's no talk. Again, we've heard attribute-based pricing, but as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing in the roadmap to take. So not as part of retail, no. Yep. None of the retail channels have uptaken attribute-based pricing. Okay, so I don't lose where I am. This is very easy to mess up, by the way. So I've added the attributes to the products in this category, and I've gone and I've set a couple of the different values that are here. So now they're on the product, and if that was my goal, then I'm done. But I actually want to see these in the point of sale too. So this is a step that a lot of people don't know they need to do, and we've changed it from release to release. So if you might have known it in one release, we've changed it. So you think you know what you're doing, and then we just give you a little curveball. Okay. So this used to be something called store product attributes, and it used to be on the store itself. And now it's called channel categories and product attributes, and it has its own menu option and it's its own form. They do the same thing, but it's in a different place, and we called it something else. Excellent. Yeah. So the feedback there was that was a good decision to do, even though it can cause some confusion from moving from version to version. Yeah, I'll do. I will explain it right now. So it does a couple things. One, this is where you set that navigation hierarchy. So if you don't set this navigation, let's say you don't care about attributes at all, but you still want to be able to browse products, you have to come here and set the navigation hierarchy. Secondly, this is where you can manage which attributes show up in which channels. So if you think of the product gets all of the attributes from all of its categories, no matter what kind. Any type of category will have all of them. Some of those may apply in your channel, some of them may not, and it may apply in one channel and not another channel. So this is where you can go in and say that this applies to my brick and mortar store, this applies to my e-commerce store, or this applies to Houston, this applies to Boston, however you want to do that. And how those are configured as well. Because remember, a lot of those things we're setting are defaults, but you can actually set it here, which is different than the default, which is another common gotcha. We tend to make things ultimately flexible, and then sometimes that adds some complexity to it. So this is a required step for MPOS to be able to browse products, setting this navigation hierarchy right here. You also have to click this button of Publish Channel Updates, or else those changes go nowhere. All right, so I can come in here, I can make all these changes, I can leave, I think I'm done. But if I didn't click Publish Channel Updates, they don't go anywhere. Yes? Yes, you do. Yes, I'll get there. Yep. So ideally, to me, this thing should have a state. Like, is it published or not published, or when was it last published? And I think that's feedback we know, but I think we can improve, because I may have just changed things here and I have no idea whether I published it or someone else published it or when it was last published or anything like that. So we can improve on that. You can also see here I've got attributes that are at the whole channel level. So these are product attributes that are assigned to the channel, not necessarily. It's on the products, but it's for all products within that channel. Yes. That's a great point too. Yes, yeah. So the point there too is that it only publishes the one channel that's selected at a time. It's not like you can change a bunch of them and click publish. It's the one that's selected here. The node. Well, you mean like if you were to do it at a higher level, it publishes whatever's selected. So, yeah. The row. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Important thing here. These are there's some legacy here. But this is called SharePoint Provision Product Attribute Group. there are attributes in here that are also required for MPOS to work properly. So this is part of seed data. It should be there on a new implementation, and if it's there, then it shouldn't be a problem. If you're changing things, or if you're creating things from scratch, or the seed data is not there, and I'll actually open this up and show you, there are some attributes that are actually properties, but our implementation requires an attribute for a property. Let me see if that makes sense. Okay, right on the product itself, there is a description on the product. Right? If you go to the product, it has a description. Our implementation, however, requires that is also an attribute. So if you ask me, either we should change that implementation, or this should be transparent to the user. This should be something that happens behind the scenes to make the implementation work. But there are a number of these. The description, the name, the item number, size, color, style, I believe are some of the other ones, if I can remember, like some of the attribute stuff. So my recommendation is to not touch this particular, this attribute group. Yes? I guess I didn't, the comment there is that there's two. Okay, I don't know. That's a good question. Okay, my guess is there's probably a lot of overlap between there, and that as long as the necessary attributes are in them, it's not going to matter which one. So, yeah, I can follow up there. I don't know the answer to that one. Yeah, yes. We've had a lot of discussions about fixing it so that if it's a property, it does not also have to be an attribute, and therefore that problem would go away there. It actually, it would also mean there's less data that needs to be created and maintained and all that. It's a fairly major undertaking, though, so I don't know if and when we'll get to it, but that's the idea. Yes?
So these reference type attributes that we have, right, so my recommendation and my comment on that is that right now if we have to, let's say there is a long description on the product part, right?
Yeah.
If I want to pull that into an attribute, I have to customize, I have to write code
Right. Yep.
So if there is a better way to provide a framework where, let's say, if I have some standard field that I wanted to pull,
Yeah.
I should be able to create a.
Yeah, so the feedback there is that if there are standard fields that you want to include as an attribute for various reasons, that there should be some kind of a framework to be able to pull that data in rather than having to customize that or move the data manually or to repopulate it. Great. Okay, make sure I'm not forgetting something here. Okay, so now I'm doing this for Houston, and the important part here that I need to do is to set attribute metadata. And now this is where you can actually set those product attribute groups and their behaviors and capabilities per category level. And if you remember, I did my handbags. So let me go to handbag here. This should have my new material attribute that I created. And you can see that it does bring in those defaults, right? So I marked that it could be, where is it? Oh, I guess it didn't bring in the default. Unless I changed that. But, or is it a refresh? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you. That's actually that's on my list because that's another thing that people tend to not do. Okay, so this again will show you all of the attributes, right? So this is just like what's on the product. All of the attributes are available there. If you want it to show up in the point of sale, thank you. I skipped a step. Is that you need to check include attribute. That is the only way to get that to show up in the point of sale. So it's on the product. That's great. You can view it in the back office as much as you like. You have to come into here and check include attribute, or else it won't show up in the point of sale. And then those other defaults that I talked about come in, but you can actually change these defaults per channel or per category. So if you're trying to troubleshoot something as why isn't this showing up, you have to come here to look. If you go look at it in the attribute group, it's not going to matter because that's just the default value. So you have to go to that channel, you have to go to that category in that channel, and then you have to make sure that it's included and that these properties are correct. Yes? Not any current plans, no. The question was if there's any plans to put validation against this. Data validation, right? Yeah. So the question there is there any plans for bulk updating? So my overall answer is we have no plans of adding anything to this in the short term. Like between now and spring or shortly after spring, there's nothing on the roadmap for this currently. Now, that doesn't mean I don't want to hear your questions because that's the feedback that's coming in. But I just, my answer is that there's nothing on the roadmap to address this. And that's because we need that feedback to get it onto the roadmap. Yes? No. So correct. So the list from before these are attribute groups that are going to apply to all the products in the channel by nature of the channel itself. Here, these are the attribute groups that are part of either the retail product hierarchy or the navigation hierarchy. If I go and if I create an attribute group and put it on the screen before where it was just Houston, that's going to go on all products. So it couldn't be just on my handbags. I could add the attribute there and it would show up on all the products, but it wouldn't be just for the handbags at that point. Yeah. And that's why like our required ones are there. Like those are the ones that have to be there for MPOS to work properly. Yes. So the question there is there anything preventing a user from one channel from changing something from another channel's configuration or their attributes? No, there's not. No. I mean, other than just whoever has access into these forms, but there's no channel-specific data striping that's happening in this particular instance. Okay. All right. So I've yes. No. If we're working with okay, so I don't. Let me take back my answer. I'm not 100% sure. So we is Scott Tucker in the room? Scott's doing that, right? Yeah. Okay. So let me double check with Scott there. I'm not aware of anything specifically for this, but we are working with Copy Company. So I'll double check on that one. Or if you see Scott, you can ask him too. Yeah. Sorry.
Just from my understanding, if you go back to the organization hierarchy, and you would take the East stores or West stores,
Mm-hmm.
include them.
You can, yeah. So the inherit will work, but again, this is at the channel level, not at the category or product level. So yes, I could manage these things all up here at Contoso Retail. If it's the properties that are shared everywhere, yes, you could set it up that way. Yep. Yes.
One feedback on inherit, it's also available in categories as well, but it's not by default yet. So what happens is, let's say if you have a large, so you have to spend a lot of time. Because generally when you are creating these at a specific level, let's say at a early category, you go in and you make the change.
Yep.
But if you are specifying on a top level, you expect that it will automatically.
Yeah, so the feedback there is that the inherit isn't checked by default. So people often will assume that it's doing that. And even if that's not the case, it's still a lot of extra work for them to go in and click that they need to inherit by default. Okay, I'm just double checking that what I needed to do is done. And that this is included and it's marked as refined. This also shows you that it does have filter settings, so I know that my refiner should work. Is everything I said the same as in CU12? Some of the namings of things and some of the UI would be different, but functionally it's all exactly the same, yes. Yep. Okay, so the other thing that you have to do here, and that I don't want to forget because I'm answering questions, is that I have to publish the channel updates. So this all looks great. If I don't click Publish Channel Update, then nothing's going to change. Where? Yeah, I think I'm good. Okay, so I've published that job now. Now there's the jobs to actually push the data, right? So This job has gone and staged the data. So there's some data manipulation and some staging that happens in the tables. And now the distribution schedule is going to move that data to the channel database. And because we made a decision back in 2012, I think R2, where we try not to duplicate any sub-jobs in different jobs. There's actually 3 jobs that need to run for this to work, and some are more intuitive than the others. So this requires the 1040 job, so the products themselves. It also requires the channel configuration job, which is the one that's less intuitive. So you wouldn't think you've changed your channel configuration, but there are sub-jobs in that scheduler job that is required for this data to move. Yep. Correct. Yep. So it's the, and I actually ran this morning hoping that it would make it go faster the second time, because the first time you do it on a new environment, there's no change tracking, and everything goes. So hopefully this doesn't take too long to run this particular job. But it's the 1040 job for products, the 1070 job for channel configuration, and then the last one is 1150, which is the catalog job. It's the catalog job. So in this case, again, I didn't touch a catalog, but because those sub-jobs are in the catalog job, then you have to run those jobs as well. The thinking, and maybe this isn't the case in real life, but the thinking is that all of these jobs are running periodically, and that the user shouldn't have to think about which jobs need to run. Right? If these things are all just running hourly or once a day or whatever that frequency is, then the user just goes in and does their data management, and then the jobs will take care of what's actually changed. Let me make sure I do this so that we don't have to wait too long for this to happen. Oh, actually, while that's running, we'll just go in here and make sure that we're not seeing that change so that you believe me that this is real. So here's my handbags. The brown leather one should not have that material specification. Okay, so there's no material there. And if I go back, I should not have that refiner capability. Yep, so that refiner is not there. Okay, good. Okay, and then my last job, that was good timing. My last job is the catalog job. Now, unless I missed a step in all the questions and side conversations, this should work. I went through it many times last night and this morning, so I'm very... That's why I wanted to do this session. Yes, I know it's nothing new, but it's something that people struggle with. Yes? No, yeah. In fact, it's the same, task guide. So there's actually the same document that I'm talking about for how to get your images to show up also includes this. So the document is written, it needs to go through some editing and publishing and that kind of stuff. Let's see, while that's going, here we go. Okay, so then just make sure this last job has run. It looks like it actually has applied already. Is that from, that's probably from now? Okay, I'll be brave. Okay, so now I will browse this is my navigation hierarchy, by the way, when we talked about navigation hierarchy before. I can then go to my handbags, and my brown leather travel bag should have material. There it is. Look at that. It's made out of leather and everything. Pretty cool. And then the European vinyl. That's some of the best vinyl in the world, by the way, the European vinyl. That one should also be, yep, there we go, vinyl. So that material came across there. And then, just to make sure I didn't do something else wrong, if I go to my sunglasses, I should not have, because actually I did this once last night. I ended up putting it in the wrong place. So this should not have material. There we go, right? So that's only in that category of products now. And then finally, to show how the refiner works, I now have material available here. So if I choose material as a refiner, we do some caching here, by the way. So the first time takes a little bit longer, and if you change something, then there could be an issue where there's a delay for the cache to refresh. Let me see if I go and add material. I think I double-clicked on only leather showing up there. Oh, okay. Why is only leather showing up there? Oh, wait a minute. Yes. Okay, so this should actually show. There we go. There's leather and vinyl there. Okay. So the reason it was showing leather there is because leather is the default. But anyway, and it does filter it out based on the data that's available there. Okay, so that is what I had planned to show for attributes and whatnot. While I'm here, though, I will talk about the catalog portion of it. We've talked about that in a couple different topics. So the way that you get there, by the way, is under the tree view of the navigation hierarchy. So this is the same navigation hierarchy. One's more visual, one's a bit quicker. But you can come up to here where it says Change Catalog. And now this is going to show me all of the catalogs for this particular store. And our demo data here is, again, very limiting and does not show this feature very well. Because if I look at my Fabricam base catalog, it's all the exact same products and categorization as my assortment. So it was basically a shortcut we took for demo data. This would be much more effective if it were different categories with different products in it. But that's not the case. But you get the idea. This could say spring catalog, summer catalog, clearance catalog, whatever, men's catalog, women's catalog, however you want that to be. All store products is the assortment. So that's basically, I'm not looking at a catalog. I'm looking at all of my assorted products. I can choose to view this from different stores. So if I wanted to view the Boston store, here actually, so you can either use the maps or you can just view all stores. And now I want to look at Boston. Boston is one of the electronics stores. So you will actually see a difference here, right? So now this is actually showing the products that are available in the electronics store. I can browse these products. I can now, since you can sell outside your assortment, I can sell them, I can return them, I can order them. So that is how you can choose a different store. If you want to look at all products that are available, then that's this one down here. Search all stores and catalogs. So now this is actually going to show me my merchandising hierarchy. So now I'm getting everything that you would see in AX if you went to released products by category. This is my sporting goods, my fashion, and my electronics. This is basically just browsing all the products that are categorized and released. Yes? Plus a treatment filter of taking out the blocked products. Now, there's a couple different ways to block things. If it's the blocked flag on the property itself, like the retail property, I don't believe that's taken out here. I think the user is informed when they try to use it. So they will see it, and then if they try to sell it, they're told it's blocked. If the product is, I think what we talked before about how we're respecting the stopped, right? Now that's not, it's like like you can stop for sales or stop for purchase, like that kind of thing. If it's stopped, then that should be filtered out of here. I believe so. If not now, that's something that was done very recently. So I don't know if it's in this particular build. Question? So the question there was, do we allow a fast way to do mass updates on attributes that have Boolean types? And I would say, I don't know if there's a fast way to do updates on any type of attribute, let alone Boolean. So, yeah. Yep. Okay, so I wasn't aware of that, but okay. So I mean, I'm aware of the Excel add-in. I didn't know that Booleans didn't work there. So I'd either open a bug or open a feedback request for that one. Okay, if there's no more questions, I think we can maybe wrap up now. Yep, thanks.